really apologize for my voice. This is my first time spring in Indiana, and apparently I'm allergic to Indiana. So bear with me a little bit. But my name is Sydney. I'm a research tech for clinical psychology lab at Purdue. And was previously presented, so might be some information we've already gone over today. You guys might have heard. Yeah, probably. Thank you. That's better. Awesome. So essentially, this presentation is just going to go over one way you could possibly use REDCap to help with research assistant management. We specifically with this survey that was created, we call the RA check-in survey or assistant check-in survey that our undergraduate research assistants fill out when they come to the lab. So a brief overview of what I'll be going over today. First, I want to highlight the importance of research for our lab. I know that seems very trivial, but I feel like during the day-to-day go through what we all end up doing per week, we kind of miss out on the importance of every person in the lab, including our undergraduates. So I just want to highlight them, then go over what the RA check-in survey is, what the components are, and how we use it, and then ultimately how it can service lab staff as well as how it can help out our themselves. And then finally, some future ideas for how the form can be used, possible new field types to add, or ways that can be utilized for other types of labs besides what we do for clinical psychology. So just a brief introduction of our lab. We're called the ICANN lab. Again, as I mentioned, we're at Purdue, and we have a pretty big lab, including our PI, Dr. Carolinas, our lab operations specialist, Dr. Swan, myself as one of the research techs, postdocs, graduate students, and then we have our 18 undergraduate RAs. And basically, the main point of our lab is we want to understand the basic processes contributing to ADHD and how we can help improve the diagnosis. Okay, sorry. So back to that main point of why I believe that research assistants are important and contribute to our lab in a variety of different ways. These are just 4 main points that I created based off of how we interact in our lab. But often our research assistants are the first line of contact to our community and our participants that are inquiring to our lab, whether it's via phone, in person, face-to-face, for community events, or over email. We want to make sure that we have established a sense of professionalism, but also engaging, and make sure our participants understand that we care genuinely for them and their best interests, especially when we're explaining studies. And there might be a lot of questions that parents have for their child's participation. Next, obviously, of course, they help collect and clean data, obviously very important to our study. And part of the ways that they do that is not only collecting the data with our participants, but online through REDCap through survey monitoring, and as well as cleaning data, such as we have EEG in our labs, so they're trained in cleaning the EEG afterwards as well. Then we have independent research projects that they complete, whether it's through like a senior capstone or thesis, or just on their own time and create group projects. Often these projects deviate a little bit from the main purpose of our main study. We call the NEMO study, but I feel like that's even contributing more in different ways because it helps give a sense of purpose in a variety of different ways through different identities that we would not consider for a main project. And then finally, they give a sense of lab community. Our research lab is pretty big, but mainly in course because of our undergraduates. And so again, as I've already mentioned, the identities they bring to the table, their past experiences, their future research interests, all create a lab that I feel is pretty comprehensive and always gives us a chance to ever grow in our field. So what is this RA check-in survey and what's its purpose? And there's several photos throughout the slideshow that feature actual research assistants, so shout out to them. So the ultimate goal of the survey is to track student commitment and contribution through the responsibility that they track the tasks that they're doing, how much time they're spending in the lab, and what all they need to communicate to lab staff, which then brings me to the second point, that it helps facilitate lab communication between staff and students, especially because most of our students have completed their hours in the evening times when staff are already gone. So this creates a one-way communication line between them that we can always know what they're doing and they can always know that we're available for questions. And then how the survey is filled out and when. The research assistants complete their surveys via a link that they can either just pull up on their laptops. We use an Apple to-do list that can just link the link and they can click on it. They can use our lab computers where we just have a link downloaded on the desktop, or they can share it via themselves on email. And they just fill these surveys out when they come into the lab for their shifts, or they can fill them afterwards, or, which sometimes happens, if they forget to fill it out for a day, they can always fill it out later on their own time on the laptop. So it's pretty accessible and it doesn't need to be filled out at any specific time, just as long as it's filled out. So the different components of this RA check-in survey, we basically just have 5 main components. We have, of course, the research assistant name that they'll just use a drop-down box to select. We have start and end times that they can stamp for the start and end of their shifts. We have a calculated hours spent box that will just show the calculated number of hours they spent based off of those start and end times. And then we have a list of various activities they might have completed during their shifts to show what they've done for the day. And we utilize several different types of text boxes to submit questions, concerns, or comments to lab staff. So the type of features that are utilized in this survey, we have several different types of field types that are used, including multiple choice drop-down list. We have text box with date time validations, calculated fields, check boxes, multiple answers, and then of course our notes box. We also have a couple special variables we use, including the field notes. We use the date difference function and the rounding function. And then finally, we use charts and alerts and notifications. So just to briefly go over what these look like, I just wanted to show, because I was a beginner to REDCap not even a year ago, so this is all very new to me. This is the different types of views with a designer view as the person who's creating the survey, and then the survey view of what it looks like to the RAs as they're completing it. So just briefly go over those types of features. Like I already mentioned, we use a multiple choice drop-down list feature for the field type, and then we just use coding in a 1-to-1 interval to list all our different RA names. We use a text box with date time validation. So the field type would be text box. So the validation over on the right-hand side, we put date time. And then we also use field notes to denote military time. I know it was mentioned earlier in a previous presentation that military time can be converted into what we use on our time now, but currently we just use military time to denote, since we use that also in our data sets. And we have that there listed for the RAs as it's helpful, especially if they're completing their shifts late at night. Let's say about 8:30 at night, it somehow becomes harder to do mental math. So that's an option for them. Then we have the now button utilized, so they can just click now if they open the survey at the beginning of their shift. Then we have the calculated field, and that just uses a calculation equation based off of those 2 time variables of the start and end time. We have a calculation equation also rounds and uses the date difference function. So date difference function, obviously, as I mentioned, uses the start and end time variables, combines them, figures out the difference between them. We have it denoted to use specifically by minute and then dividing it by 60 to calculate hours. You can also just put lowercase h for hours. This is just how the calculation was created in the beginning. And then you mark a comma and 2 to say that you would like to round to 2 decimal points. And then finally, the round function overall encasing that calculation equation to round up your variable. And then on the survey view, that's the ending result where you have your shift time, start, end listed, and then they can see the number of hours that they actually completed on their day. We also use checkboxes with multiple answers. Again, same thing. You just use the coding and do a 1-to-1 interval and list all the different types of tasks that are done in the lab. I just use some very basic tasks that I feel like might be applicable to several different types of labs, but we have probably about 19 options on our actual survey. This is just a mock one. Okay. No, it's okay. So these are some options that they could possibly have done during their lab time and the time that they spent during their shift, including we have another option that uses branching logic to open up a text box for them to enter in whatever other tasks that they did that might not have been encompassed in those list options once they complete it. And then finally, we use that notes box. Specifically, we use it to, in conjunction with alerts and notifications, to notify our lab staff of any concerns or questions that the RAs might have that came up during their shift. We use field labels to give instructions and examples, such as this is what this field type is used for. As an example, we often have RAs that will submit questions regarding eligibility screenings if they're unsure whether or not a participant is eligible, or they had a participant contact them and request a certain type of survey or email to be sent to them. And lab staff are the only ones that have access to email, so they'll send an email to us that says, "Can you please relay this information to the participant?" So that is one way that we use the notes box. So then overall, no, those are the basic functions and parts utilized in the survey. So how can the survey help lab staff? Overall, the survey tracks hours and tasks, obviously, that are done by the RAs each time they come into the lab. I think one of the main parts that helps me the most is it helps communicate those and address those concerns and questions. It reduces the um, amount of time that RAs have to take to email and figure out who to email, especially when there's so many different staff members and they're not sure who specializes in what or does what certain tasks. This is just one way for them to convey information, and then it's up to staff members to figure out who needs to do what. It also summarizes the different types of tasks that are done in the lab and the frequency that they're done at. Each of these RAs are filling out their tasks and what they're done each day. And so this helps give me a broad overview of what's happening on a day-to-day basis in our lab and what type of tasks are being done and maybe what type of tasks are falling to the wayside. Finally, it collects and restores this information for future recommendations and for evaluations or reports. You can basically get a broad overview of each RA and their time spent in the lab, the tasks that they've done, the amount of hours that they've spent, frequently asked questions, or things that they've done to improve the lab. And it really helps with down the line, maybe say 2 or 3 years when this RA asks for a recommendation letter, you have all this information up there time in lab spent now to utilize. And then finally, it just helps promote a supportive and positive lab culture. Even though it might seem like another task that the RA has to do while they're in the lab, I feel like this is genuinely a way to show that we care about what the RAs are doing. They're doing very important work, and this is one way to document that work and to show their contribution in a way that's meaningful for both us and them. So one of the ways that I mentioned for lab staff is it helps with evaluations or being able to see the types of tasks and frequencies that are done in the lab. One of the ways that I do this is using the reports function. And so we'll create reports based off of each RA or based off of a certain type of task. This is an example where I created a report based off of an RA, and it gives each of their entries along with all the variables and the answers to each question. You can also use filter logic to do this by date. For example, if you wanted to know within the past 2 weeks, what has an RA done, or within the past semester. Or if you wanted to know, for example, if they mentioned a certain ID in one of their comments, you can filter it by that as well. So it's an easy way to help get a specific type of information in one comprehensive area. And then similarly with creating reports, you can also use the stats and charts function. And basically that just gives a quantitative overview of the same type of information you just saw in the report, but it narrows it down by question, and you can use it for frequency, averaging, or so forth. I specifically use it with these reports to look at the frequency of types of tasks that are done by each RA in the lab, especially with RAs that are training. It's often helpful to be able to look at how much experience they've gotten with different types of tasks and what types of tasks they might need to retrain on, gain more experience of coaching on, or what types of tasks that I know that they have proficiency in because they've done it so many times. And then finally, how can the survey also help our research assistants? There's a lot of similar points, but I feel like they have a different type of weight to them. So again, it tracks hours and tasks, but for our research assistants, this helps them with their professional development. They're able to use all this information via those reports. They're able to request that information from me, and I can give it to them to help build their CVs, their resumes. They can get quantitative labels on the resume of this is the number of clinical hours I've had, this is the number of phone screens I've done. It also helps with lab accountability. It gives them the opportunity to be able to write their hours and not have to manually write them, especially for those RAs that are using such as research credits where they need to make a certain number of hours per week. This helps them document that. And again, for their professional development, it's just a way of showing that they're able to stay consistent and provide quality work in their tasks done during the lab. Again, this reduces the amount of time that they have to figure out how to communicate information to each lab staff member or who it needs to be communicated to. This information just allows them to be able to have one singular survey that they can submit any questions or concerns to, and it gets narrowed down to the right staff member based off of an alert logic that we use. And then finally, again, it just records those feelings of competency by showing how much they are truly getting done at the lab. And it just breaks up the amount of time that they are spending in the lab on a day-to-day basis. So using those alerts and notifications with those notes boxes, some of the question examples that we use for those is like, do you have any questions for lab staff? Do you need to inform lab staff of anything? We also have what we call an RA kudos, where they can submit compliments about other lab staff or other research assistants and how well that they were helping them during the week or during their day. And then, of course, any suggestions or improvements. We always want to hear from our research assistants about how we can improve the lab. And again, that's just a view of the designer view of who, when you're creating these alerts, what that looks like. And then the survey view is just what it looks like to the RA. So we just have all of our alerts triggered to sent to our main lab account email inbox, but you can have it sent to specific lab staff if you have certain types of tasks that are done, such as say by a postdoc, you can just have it sent to their lab email instead. We also just have the filter logic used as if the box does not equal nothing, or if there is something inside the box, then an alert will be triggered, and it just says verbatim what the RA typed in. You can also have it sent at different times. We just have it sent immediately, but maybe you want to establish a little bit of work-life balance and have it sent at 9 a.m. the next day. You can have it sent on the next day at 9 a.m. And then also it'll be at the top of your inbox. You know that those important messages are getting to you and they're visible to you. And again, this is just an overview picture of what it looks like, survey view, how it looks like when you're developing the alert, and then what it looks like to our lab inbox. We use typing, so we just have the RA name, needs us to tell us something, and then it has exactly what they wrote down in their message box as the subject. So then possible future directions for this tool based off of what I was thinking for it. Ideas with using the REDCap features, using that alerts feature, you could also use it to submit improvements for the lab. RAs, we have a similar thing with the text box, but if you have a specific type of survey that you would like to use, get suggestions on, or a certain type of protocol that you would like to have changes to, you could create an alert for that and they could submit questions for that. I also thought it could be a cool idea to use that to collect ideas for a research project thing, especially at the beginning of the semester when you have research assistants creating ideas for their capstones or their senior theses. This might be a cool way to have them collect all their ideas in one area, so then they can work on them together. And then similarly, creating an alert to notify lab staff of the progression of a project or task, especially if it's dependent on the lab staff to keep that task going. So then they know the progress of it after each. You can also use that date difference function, not only to calculate the number of hours that they spent in the lab, but if they have to meet a certain number of hours, so just like 9 credits, you can have that subtracted by 9. So then they know, okay, I've done this much for the day, so I have this much time left for the week. And then in terms of ideas for new types of field types that you can use in that survey, I know you can embed links or PDFs or documents that are attached to it. And I thought that could be a cool idea to embed like a scheduling program link or a when to meet link. If there's RAs that want to request a certain meeting time with lab staff, That way they don't have to, again, send emails to multiple different types of people. They can just be all integrated into one area, and then lab staff know, okay, somebody's requested a meeting for me, and they can get back to them with an alternate time if needed. Similarly, attaching a PDF, maybe you've required readings for lab meetings, or if there's an update in protocols, or if there's information that needs to be communicated in a way that you would like all research assistants comprehensively know and not have to send email or wait to see them in person. That's one way to communicate information, as well as using those announcement banners. And essentially, it's just like a field text box to communicate information. We've done that before when there's been a change in the location of items in lab. That way, I don't have to worry about telling each individual person when they come into lab, hey, this has changed. They can just look on their survey and know, all right, I've taken note. This has changed within our, we specifically used it that we were using a whiteboard for a specific task now. So that's just one example. That was the RA check-in survey and just a way to utilize it for research management. But I was interested in knowing the other types of labs that are represented here, or how research assistants work in your guys' lab, just because this has been my only experience with it, and how maybe the tool could be utilized for your guys' lab, or what types of tasks are done, or ways that you thought that it could be altered to best fit your needs. And of course, if you have any questions for me, answer any questions. Yeah, so it's on yes, so how do RAs access the survey link to fill out the survey was the question. And we use To-Do List, a program that we just post a survey link as an embedded link that they can click on it, but it also could be accessed on the lab computer desktops. It's just a copy link that we pasted on there, or if they sent it to themselves over email or something, that's another way that they can quickly access it. But usually it's just in one comprehensive area that we've just pasted the link that everybody has access to, which is on the lab computers or on To-Do-List is what we use.
It's not a question, so I want to commend you on the idea of certain communications so that you can say it once and everyone gets people doing the process. That's a great idea.
Yeah, we often have a lot of newer RAs that come in each semester and they're retrained. And of course, our other RAs that have already been trained do a great job explaining everything, but sometimes there is definitely a miscommunication on things that have been updated or protocols. So yeah, it's been very helpful for us. Anybody have any other questions, or anybody thought of anything related to their lab?